Well, hey everyone. We are here at Joy Workout number 11, day 11. And I wanted to address a kind of a heavy topic today because one of our members mentioned it yesterday, and I think that other people are feeling it at different levels at different times in their lives, and that is death, grief, and sadness, and joy. I don't know how to talk about death and grief and sadness in a holistic way without bringing up spirituality. So I wanted to address that first and then go into a little bit of the psychology of things that you can do to help release on the energy of grief and sadness without pressuring yourself to make it go away, because that'll create more difficulty. So we're going to look at the 12 Practices ebook. And in the ebook, there's a section on joy-based living and spirituality. So what I'd like to do is read the first couple of paragraphs from that page, and then we'll go from there. Okay. And so it says, throughout this joy-based living practices ebook, you've learned to access your radiance by getting in touch with your embodied experiences, recognizing and stopping cultural woundings, and bringing healing fields to yourself and to your relationships. At Joy-Based Living, we believe that everyone is inherently radiant and everyone is worthy of joy, regardless of their spiritual beliefs. We also see that, like rays of the sun, the way we experience life, or God, or universe, or higher power, the way we experience life with a capital L influences all of the elements: our emotions, our desires, our community, our things, and ourselves. For example, if you believe that life is for you, you will color all the other elements very differently than if you believe that life is against you. Our goal at Joy-Based Living is to create more connection and bonding within and among people. And the topic of God can be divisive, to say the least. So I want you to consider the idea about that you've come from someplace mystical, regardless of what you believe that is. You came from someplace and you're going to someplace, and it's a mystery to most of us that I know. I don't have the answers about that. I know it's a mystery. One of the things that helps me is to feel grateful for that mystery. For some reason, even though a lot of people complain about their lives, they don't want their lives taken away, right? And why is that? There's a gift in life. So somebody, something, some energy gifted us with life. No different than a blade of grass in terms of the energy itself that is creative. So if you think from that wider perspective, it can help. It's not a scientific perspective. It is a spiritual perspective. The wideness of the perspective is something that I think that our culture is really lacking, and people really suffer for not having it. So couple of things psychologically with grief that can help you. One of the authors that we turn to as a joy-based living group is Brene Brown. And she's written books on vulnerability and shame and spirituality. And one of the things that she says about grief can be very, very helpful, is that nobody can tell somebody else how long or how deep they should be grieving for. That's not anybody's right to impose on somebody else. Like, oh, you should be over it by now. We don't do that here. The other thing is that grief heals in community. It's very hard to heal grief in isolation. And so one of the things that happens around grief and sadness is we live in a culture that tells us we're supposed to be strong all the time. And we're not supposed to be sad. And if we are, then we need to suck it up at, some point soon and get over it. We don't do that here. A couple of years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, my aunt's nephew from another side of the family jumped out of an 18-story building in Israel and died. And he was about 18. And my aunt went into shock and grief, and it was extreme. And I remember it was the day before Thanksgiving that I spoke with her. I reached out to her. She reached out to me. I was at Whole Foods at the time, so I went upstairs and had a conversation with her. And I felt like enough weeks had passed that we could have this conversation, because she was really going in a downward spiral. And I said, do you want a little bit of assistance with this? Because this is really hard. The holidays were coming up, and it was harder because of that, I think. And she said yes. And so that's important to say that, because I wouldn't impose this conversation on anybody. And I said, I have a feeling that there's another feeling underneath the sadness that is keeping you stuck in the sadness. And she's somebody who has a pretty good sense of emotional literacy. She taught me a lot about being present and sharing what you feel and that kind of a thing. But there are some feelings that she doesn't ever want to be around or touch. She wants to be strong. And she said, okay, what is it? And I said, you feel powerless. Like, you can't help your sister. You can't help your other, like, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing that you can do to change this, to make it better, to make it go away. Because she's a fixer, problem solver, helper person. And it was as though it seemed to me like she could breathe again. She said, something just lifted. It just lifted. So, when we talk about, like, the Tell Me More worksheets at which you can find at Patreon, we have some of the examples there. That's the purpose of the Tell Me More worksheets, is to help you work through stuff like that. I find it interesting that when we look at the list of feelings, different ones that I've looked at, I've looked at many of them. It's very rare to see sadness and grief on it, because I think people don't really know where to put sadness and grief, because it can feel like shame and powerlessness, but it can also feel like, frustration and anger. Like, I think it can be in different places, and then you grieve, and then you move into a place of acceptance. And so, but if somebody's stuck in chronic grief, it can really, really, really take them down. I've just honor each of your experiences. One of the books that has helped me greatly, that we refer to as well, is Letting Go by David Hawkins. Letting Go: The Pathway of Surrender. This just has a lot of information and helpful psychological releases with different feelings. When my grandfather died, I laughed. I was like, God, good luck. You're going to have your hands full. And then when a 13-year-old that I didn't even know died, who was a son of a colleague of mine, I was in grief for a year. When my dog died, it took me a few months of deep sadness. And then I was like, what's going on with this? And found out that what I missed was the devotion that I had for him. It was my devotion that I missed. And so as soon as I realized that, the sadness lifted. And so, I hope this is helpful. I hope having just having the conversation is helpful. I don't expect it to be a magic one that makes everything just go away, but maybe you feel a bit less alone. Maybe it's given you a doorway to another way to think about your experience or to experience your sadness. Um, Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if there's anything else that I can do or we can do to be there for you. Okay. Love you.